Hello. Um, this is the second video in a series I'm going to do about basics of synthesis. The first one was called Basics of Analog Synthesis, and that was very much talking about voltage control oscillator, voltage control filter, and voltage controlled amplifier. If you are new to the subject and you haven't watched that video first, I would recommend doing so because I'm not going to go over that ground again. One of the things I said in that video that I was going to do, I was going to cover what a quantizer does, what slew or edge does, why that's important in a voltage controlled synthesizer, and look at other ways of changing the pitch of an oscillator rather than using a keyboard. All I demonstrated last time was using a keyboard, basically by a MIDI to CV converter, which is included in the AE system, so that a certain MIDI note made a certain voltage, which I then patched to the oscillator. So my oscillator is here. I haven't bothered with a filter for the purposes of this video, and there's an amplifier that's going to control its volume for us. Otherwise, if I connected it straight to the output, it'd just do that the whole time. So obviously we need to control its volume. Right, so what I plan to do is I'm going to use one or both, I haven't quite got decided yet, of the sequencer modules that are available with the tangible waves AE Modular system. The sequence 16, the larger module, and the sequence 8. They're functionally exactly the same, except that one is a maximum of 8 steps and one's a maximum of 16 steps. There is a couple of other minor differences as well, partly because the sequence 8 is a newer module, so a couple of things that were learnt from the design of the 16 were improved on the 8. So the 8's a slightly more modern design. I have to say I don't know if Robert at Tangible Waves has upgraded the current module sequence 16. I don't know, but it's minor things that most of you wouldn't even notice, I suspect. So what we'll do is, the first thing you need is, as I say, the oscillator's going into my amplifier. We've got to open the amplifier. So we can, just like I demonstrated before, we can just borrow the low frequency oscillator, and we'll be doing quite a lot with this low frequency oscillator. So so that's just demonstrating that works, but I'm going to take that away because what we actually want to do for the purposes of this video is trigger, and we will start off with the sequence 8. It's exactly the same for the other one. So if the clock in, because some synth sequencers have a built-in timer themselves, and they even sometimes can do certain beats per minute and so on. But a proper sequencer, and most sequencers that aren't included inside the synthesizer, will need some sort of external clock. And in this case, we're not using, there's no MIDI involved here at all. We're just using voltages. So I'm going to use that pulse from that low frequency oscillator to drive my SQ8. And you can see here now, we're scrolling through the 8 steps. So what it is one of the things I like about these sequencers is some sequencers have a knob per step, and you actually tune them yourself. You've got to set each of the 16 voltages, or sorry, 8 voltages in this case, sorry. And of course, obviously, then there's an issue potentially with tuning and things, or if you want to change more things in one go, it can be more tricky. And what Tangible Waves have done, which I think's a nice thing to do because it's different, is actually these 4 knobs here down this side are the voltage you want, the tuning, if you like. And then you select on each step which one you want, whether you want it to be a rest, and we'll talk more about how you do a rest in a minute. Or do you want it to do one of these 4 pitches, or do you want it to do the bass, the lowest? Basically, these are voltages, and if you don't pick one of these, you get 0 volts. So it's the oscillator would just be the pitch it would be if it was on 0 volts. So I think the best way of making that gobbledygook sound work is to actually connect it. So we'll go ahead and connect it up. So the CV out from the SQ8 goes into the oscillator. And one of the things I'm demonstrating here is that what I did after learning from the first video is I have actually screwed these modules in so they don't roll about all over the place. So we've now got the control the voltage from the SQ8 is now going into the VCO. So the pitch is changing on the VCO, but obviously we can't hear it. And you can see here we've got a gate light flashing. So this is a pulse. When it goes to the next step, we're getting a pulse. So strangely enough, we need that gate to go to the amplifier to tell it to open. Right, that's not working very well. So what we'll do is I did put an envelope in, and just in case this happened. So I've now sent that trigger to this envelope. It's not working very well, either, is it? What else did I put it in the wrong socket? He says. Yes, there you go. I put it in the wrong socket. Sorry, this is why you practice. There we go. Sorry, well, won't bother with an envelope. Sorry, I think I put it accidentally in the CV one. Because what it is down the side of the. I'll just silence that for a moment. What I've done is what they do on all the Tangible Waves modules is a little black line that marks. So CV and the top 3 are marked, and I actually put it in the 3rd one down. I thought I'd missed, but there you go. So useful little learning thing there, and you can see the gate one's got a little line on the next one's down. Now, strange enough, it's working fine. So what these lights are doing is telling you which CV1 is 0 volts. That's the lowest note you can play because you're not telling it to go up. Because this obviously will be different on different systems. Like Eurorack won't work quite like this because they can go into negative voltages. But with Tangible Waves, AE Modular, it's 0 to 5 volts. So obviously your lowest voltage is 0 and your maximum is 5. So you select your lowest note with your oscillator, and that will be when the sequencer's on 0 volts, that'll be your lowest note, and then you can go up from there. So 0 volts, and then this one, that one. Yep, there we go. And this one, there we go. So you know which one is playing each time. So if I change them, right. So what you can see there now is I've done some rests. And what's happening, it's still actually generating a voltage, but the gate's not going off every step. So if I change the... I think that was the right one. No, it wasn't. It was the next one. There we go. So again, if I disconnect the gate, there's no sound because you've got to trigger the amplifier as well. So turning these knobs makes me select a different pitch on these. So let's maybe put them all on the same one. See, so I'm constantly triggering this one now. You can see the lights are going out. So if I change this knob, the pitch will change. So that's near as damn it 0 volts. And then So I'll put it there just for now. Okay. Now that may well sound quite a bit out of tune to you, and that was quite deliberate because this is where a quantizer comes in. If I make sure I get the right lead. Yeah, so that's the pitch with 0 volts. So we can take that one out actually. We'll use a nice little yellow one. The main reason I'm being so cautious or careful about using shorter wires is just to try and make sure that it can be shown on the video. So I've now got the CV of the sequencer going out into the quantizer, and I'll now have the out of the quantizer going into the VCO. Right, so what's happening now, all quantizers work pretty much on the same way, is if I change the voltage, I'll just make it go on a bit longer. Oh, so just bear with me a second, I'll just change that because what we want is that sound to go on a bit longer so you can hear me changing the pitch. Just a moment. So I'm putting the envelope in again. And you can hear that stepping down now. And now going back up again. So what's actually happening there, I'll turn that down a second. So what's actually happening there is what the quantizer is doing is saying, well, you give me roughly that voltage, I'm going to put it to the voltage that is nearest to the note in the scale you've selected. And you see in this particular example I've selected a Dorian scale, and don't ask me what that means, I've no idea. But in all quantizers will have scales you can choose. I mean, most people are used to things like C major and C major and that sort of thing. You see there's minor, there's major. Dorian, I actually think Dorian sounds really nice for lead lines, whatever it means. So, but like any modular, the best things to do is have a play. And any synthesizer, to be honest, just have a fiddle and see what it does. So minor scales are quite often more to do with sad music. Major scales tend to be more triumphant or full music. But like most things to do with classical music, you don't have to pay any real attention to it at all because the electronics changes so much. There's so many things that are different, and sometimes, quite a lot of the best songs don't follow any of these musical rules at all. Yeah. I am going to I need to change it to different notes. Bear with me a second. No, but if I did it alternately, like you're supposed to, I meant to, so I didn't do it. So I'm doing roughly alternate notes. So this is to demonstrate the slew edge. So if you, when you change pitch, at the moment the pitch is just changing very quickly, and a lot of acoustic instruments in particular, string ones spring to mind. You'll even, the guitarist in particular, or even slide their finger down. There's two ways of doing it. There's glissando, which is where the note changes to the note of the scale, and in effect that's what I was just demonstrating with the quantizer. But I've quite deliberately put the quantizer before the slew edge in this example. And I actually don't know what this is going to do because I haven't checked the settings of the slew edge, but we'll wait a moment. Right, so at the moment you can see it's just switching. There's no delay, if you like, because what slew is, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember the name, portmanteau. I think there are a few. Thankfully, occasionally my brain saves me. So glissando, if you go from a note on a scale to a low note, it'll play all the notes in between, or certainly most of them. Depends on how fast you do it. With portmanteau, it's a continuous change, and that's why this is after the quantizer. So I'll slew. So now, obviously not a very musical example, but you're now getting that change of it's not switching straight from one note to another. And you see now that's taking so long to change that actually the next step of this sequence is triggering, so we're not getting to either pitch. We'll change it back the other way. Where you've got there, you can hear I'm just getting a little snippet at the beginning of the sound, and that's very common on acoustic instruments. That you get that it doesn't go. And also when we sing as well, it's very rare you go straight to the true pitch that you're going for. So that's actually quite an important thing to put on if you're trying to emulate real and inverted comma letter instrument, or something that sounds more natural. It also tends to help on lead lines and things like that, because our ears are much more sensitive to higher frequencies. You can pretty much, it's very rare it's important to have a fussy bass sound, or low end sound. They're quite often simple, basic, and you very rarely do much of it, even have to do much of a tune either. Quite often it just supports the rest of the music. And it's because our ears are much more geared to, mostly obviously they focus on the frequencies that we tend to speak in, but also the high end we're much more attention to detail. I'm assuming it's from the days of being hunter-gatherers that if you heard it, it was important you heard a twig snap and you could tell where it was coming from or something, that sort of thing. Okay, so that's a slew edge, so I'm going to stop that for a moment. What I was wanting to demonstrate here was I just mentioned about the accent, and what it's be doing in this particular instance when it gets there. I'll turn the sound up. This step here is on accent. So that there, where you've got multiple triggers within a beat, because when you say you can call one of those a beat, that's called a ratchet. So if anybody talks about ratcheting, this is ratcheting. You get multiple triggers within the beat of the bar. So one of the things you'll hear talked about a lot in forums about synths and stuff is attenuators, and all that means is something that reduces the level. I thought the best thing to do was to demonstrate this. So all I've got is I've got the LFO going into the VCO. I'll turn the VCO up. And I've got it on here, I've got it going into the modulation input, and that's controlled by this top knob here, which is the modulation depth. So this is your attenuator. I've got the attenuator all the way down, so there's nothing at all. As I turn it up, and back down again. That's where we're at. There's usually a sweet spot somewhere it's nice. Maybe a bit too much, but just to show you, I'm messing with the LFO now. Making different wave shapes and different speeds. Okay, so the attenuation is, this knob is attenuating the signal from the LFO, because if I had it on full blast, it's too much, it's not musical in this particular instance. No, I don't think so anyway. So that's what an attenuator is. If you hear of an invert. Right, for this last section of the video, I just thought I'd run through what I discussed briefly about the 16 steps and 4/4 time in terms of triggering, or 4/4 bass drums in terms of triggering. So what I've done is we've got a 16-step sequence running, which we've got the volume down on at the moment, and on steps 1, 5, 9 and 13 I've got a trigger going out to the bass drum, and I've put it so they're on these 4 faders, which I meant to put down before I started recording, so I'll just turn those 3 down. I'll tell you why more later. And then this red one here on step 15 is going into this envelope, and the envelope will trigger the clap, which I've got unplugged at the moment. As you can see, the wire's out. The little mixer I'm using has only got 3 ends, so there's only 2 control volumes, so I couldn't middle with that. And you can see I've already sort of bastardized the thing to get it in here. This one's actually sat off the end of the case, and this one, you can see, is just sat on top. It's just bodged together for the purposes of this video. So I'll turn the sequence up. So what we've got at the moment is if this was a 4/4 bar, there's just a kick drum on the downbeat, the first beat of the bar. See, so on this one here. Okay, so let's put on 2/4. This isn't 2/4 time. Now, of course, quite often you would now have a snare on the offbeat, not the down, not the regular beat of the bar, or you might have the snare on step 5 or step 9. But I'm just getting you towards what I'm really driving at with this is the feel between what sort of a bass line in this case and the kick drum. The interplay between the kick drum and the bass line is quite important. So let's put all 4 of them on now. So you can tell the difference, and it's an apparent increase in tempo, but I haven't changed the speed of the sequencer at all. It just feels different. So that's all 4. This will be just 2. I won't go back down to 1 but one of the things I want to demonstrate here, and I'm hoping I'll get the timing right, is one of the reasons I put it into an envelope, and I'll now put the clap on. Now, that's not quite on the beat I want it to be on, but what I wanted to show here was so what I'm trying to do there for you is put the clap on the beat, but this actually works much better if I put the 4/4 drum back on again, the 4/4 kick drum I should say. So what's happening here is I'm playing 3 annually, and the last one on step 15, that one was bad timing. Oh, my timing's gone now because I've been talking. I'll stop demonstrating that now, you get the idea. But the more important point I wanted to get over, in fact I'll unplug the clap. There you go, so the clap's not going off anymore. Is that it's this is actually a not very interesting sequence. I can make it a bit lower pitched. So just going back to what I'd mentioned previously, is so I'm picking the lowest note with the coarse tune, and because I've got the sequencer going through the quantizer, the other notes should still be consistent to that first note, and they should all be tuned, or at least sound okay. I'm not sure I'd call this tuned, but it sounds okay. So I'll just turn the bass down a little bit. just to try and make the kick drum a bit more obvious for you. I'll go down to 2 kick drums. I'll go down to 1 kick drum. And go back to all 4 again. And you see a very different feel with a different amount of kick drums. And of course there's other things you could do. You could put kick drums on other beats or other steps of the sequence. The reason I'm using this mixer for the kick drum is these triggers, these individual outs aren't quite powerful triggers putting through the mixers, so I put them in excuse me. The reason I put these through a mixer is the kick drum's got 2 trigger inputs, but I need 4. So I put 4 into this mixer, made sure it was on DC rather than audio, and then that goes out into the bass drum module. So what I've got here is the bass drum module, and this is the clap module over here, and then their audio is getting mixed in this little mixer at the top, along with the bass line. This little one here is a mixer. So these are micro modules. These 2 are by Wonky Stuff. This one's by Tangible Waves. So I think that's it. I hope you thought it was useful and interesting, and if you, as always, if you've got any questions, please feel free to ask. I deliberately kept it fairly simple. And to finish, I just wanted to mention the thing about, do put things through things like an envelope, because then you can just if you want to. Okay, thanks so much. Bye.